Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Salary Commission for Elected Officials. I just want to note that if you're going to comment on something, please make sure that your microphone's on so we can hear it in the recording. You just touch it and the little green light comes on. Commissioner Carnahan let me know that she wasn't able to make it today, and so I would like to have a motion to excuse her.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so I'm going to take roll call real quick. Commissioner Pitzer?
Here.
Commissioner Rembert?
Here.
Commissioner Sires?
Here.
Commissioner Weatherly?
Here.
And I'll turn it over to Mike.
Just be correct, I have to push it every time to be recorded. I'm sorry? The microphone.
As long as the light's green, it's on. Yeah. Well, thank you all for being here. This is the maiden voyage of the first ever Salary Commission, so you guys are going to go down one way or the other in infamy or history. But I do very much on a personal level appreciate it. This is a very complicated issue that you're going to help us sort through. So Salary Commission for Elected Officials. So just a quick how did we get here moment. Past practice of this community and like a lot of other communities is the elected officials would set their salaries in a very, I guess the best way I can describe it is an uncomfortable way. And for some of you that may not know me, I was an elected council member on the west side before I moved over here. So I've been on that side of the table with them. And talking about what to pay yourself as an elected official is you know, you put a lot of hours in and, you know, on an hourly basis and so on and so forth. It gets a little dicey. So in the past, that's how the mayor and the Pullman City Council have addressed issues of salary. And what would always happen is once they made a decision, those numbers would stay frozen until the next election cycle. So you cannot vote yourself a raise while you're in office. You would have to run for office again, or the next person who wins that seat would get that. So the last time this happened, council members, January of 2016, January 1st of 2016, received a pay bump. And for the mayor, it's been since 2008. So what happened is the state has done some work on this to clean some things up, streamline, make a public process, and ask people from the community like you to come forward and serve on this volunteer commission and say, we will look at this independently with arm's length from any elected officials and make these salary decisions on behalf of the community. And then those would go into effect at the next January 1st term. I got another slide on that on kind of what the options are, but basically what happened now is on July 12th, the City Council adopted an ordinance to create City Code 1.58, establishing the Salary Commission, what the parameters were, and how the organization would function to bring a final answer through. Separate, arm's length from the elected officials, so they don't have to have these uncomfortable or concerning discussions, and this way the community is still fully represented. So the Salary Commission, they 5 members, all must reside in Pullman, all must be registered voters to make the qualifications. On October 18th, your names were appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the City Council to be here today and however long it takes to get through this process. When your work is done, you're done. You can walk away from this unless you had so much fun. There's another commission that's scheduled to go in the even years because that's when we do budget. So to bring the group back in even years, and ahead of that, set a 2-year budget for these elected officials. You are not required to come back. I might put my hand around you and say, oh, you know, we got a few folks that are new. Can you help lead them through the process? But if you say yes, you're guaranteed out after the second time because there is in the ordinance saying you may not serve more than 2 consecutive terms on this commission. So the most important part about all of this is community participation. That's why you're here, to represent the community, and as well to hold these meetings in public, record these meetings so people can watch, and just everything that's going on between here, there is very, very public. So if anybody wants to come in and comment on it, they have the ability to do that. The last piece would be holding an open public hearing and allowing people to come in and make comments based on what you've researched and where you are going and how that works out on a timeline we'll be discussing on another agenda item here. But the most important part is very, very public. And as part, these are Open Public Meeting Act meetings, and we need to go through all those processes as well. So your mission here, as I mentioned earlier, is to review the current salary of the elected officials. Currently, the mayor is making $1,417 per month, and that's been since January of 2008. There's 7 city council members. They're making $550 per month since January of 16. So there's options here. There's the increase the salary option. That would take effect January 1st if you were to provide that paperwork to the clerk. There's obviously maintaining the current salaries. No decision is the same as a decision saying maintain the current salaries. And the last option, of course, is decrease the salaries. In that situation, based on the RCW, that's a lot like the way that things used to happen with the old go-around. You can't decrease the salaries of the current sitting members. So when they are back up for election again, that's when their new decreased salaries would take over. And just for ways in being, we have 5 council members that are up for election in 2023, as well as the mayor. So questions and next steps. According to the agenda here, we'll need to select a chairperson for official running this meeting, and then a secretary. Now, the good news on the secretary is you're not taking notes. That's why Dee is here. It's just sign off in authority. I have a presentation on that enormous spreadsheet that I sent everybody, and kind of my methodology about coming up through that. And then certainly commission discussion, and then set future meetings. So are there any questions at this point? Okay. Then I'm going to ask, is there somebody that would like to lead this group? Is there somebody that works well if they're voluntold? We need a chairperson and a secretary to become the official heads of this.
Ted, Rob,
I got straws in the back too.
you're on. Does somebody want to be chairperson?
That's the whole voluntold thing. I can do that.
I'll second that.
What happened?
I volunteered.
Karen
Told.
volunteered and
Joe seconded.
Joe seconded it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And then now that you're in the position, Karen, you can ask for a vote on the secretary.
I move that we vote that Dee is a fabulous secretary and we keep her.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Outstanding. Thank
You're
you.
in, Dee.
Okay. So the next step is looking at Excel Wasteland. And I'm sorry if I got too deep. I wanted to go deeper, but I had to pull myself back at a certain point. Sent a memo attached to this, kind of walking everybody through each column as I saw it the best. But for the people that aren't following along at home, it is in the packet for the commission. But the long and the short, I started with, I took the 10 biggest cities and just omitted them. We don't have much to do with them other than 2 of them are in eastern Washington, a little bit north of us, but they're very large cities. And even, you know, the next biggest one, Yakima, at 96,000 folks, they have their own separate pieces, but we had to start somewhere, so I felt real good about that. And what I did is just took the next batch all the way down to 18,000 population, unless that city was in eastern Washington and it had a population over 16. So that 18 to 16,000 piece, there was a couple west side cities that were omitted, like Anacortes. But there weren't any east side cities as we go all the way down to the piece. I wasn't trying to get to a particular number, a jumping off point, and it just so happens there's 51 cities and Pullman is one of them. So we got all the way down to Sunnyside. And something about Sunnyside is whenever we do comparables on bargaining contracts, we have, which is the fourth tab, we always, Walla Walla, Wenatchee, Moses Lake, Ellensburg, and then there's two outliers they usually throw in the mix, is Richland on the high end and Sunnyside on the low end. So traditionally, internally, we've always thrown out those two outliers and focused on those other four cities. But the good news is both of those cities are represented in the totality, even though I didn't put them on the comparables. And as I'm talking to you about it now, I realize I've done that because it's so automatic around here. So yeah, the long and the short is what you have here on that list is the top 50 cities listed by population. And of these cities, 4 of them, just recently the Association of Washington Cities produced a salary survey. And 4 cities chose not to participate in that. That's where you see the red lines: Arlington, SeaTac, Bellingham, and Edmonds, I believe. So we have a whole 47. And then there was a few spots where we had to go looking for some information that they didn't publish, but it was out there. And that's what you see in the gray areas where we were able to go pull salaries. Saw that a lot for city managers because a lot of those folks are on contract as opposed to an approved salary deal. And the only reason we included city managers and city administrators in this is so you could see how the city was kind of set up politically and what type of support was there for the elected officials, because there's a few full-time mayors, as you can see, that do not have a city administrator, do not have a city manager, and kind of take on that role of their own. So other things that, and I left Pullman in blue there so you can dial right into it all the time. Another item just worth mentioning real quick is the city administrator salaries there in orange at the top. Those cities didn't have a true title, but when you looked at the workload and job description, they were essentially in that role. And there certainly weren't a city manager, because a city manager is a different role than the city administrator. So we definitely wanted to show who was what on those. And then just clearing that across, you'll see a lot of mayors listed as part-time or full-time. And then the council members, 6 or 7. So a lot of those folks that have 6, really the mayor acts as the 7th council member. That's the city manager type of government, where they are still a voting member. They just are the presiding officer as well. And as you go down, you'll see like Redmond has a full-time mayor and 7 city council members and essentially a city administrator. The next column out there, column I, those are the full-time staff that's approved by budget. So just another measure point. The assessed value is the taxable value of the community, where they can assess property taxes against that. The regular levy amount is just the plain property tax levy, no bonds, no special levies like EMS like Pullman has. So what are they collecting in property taxes in that community? And then your levy per capita, just simple math, what's the levy, how many people? So a little more apples to apples from one community to another. A group like Sunnyside that doesn't have the large assessed value like, say, Mercer Island does. Then we do that again with the sales tax revenue. That's the local collection. So for Pullman, that's the 1.3%. Not the full 7.9, because part of it's going to the state, part of it's going to the county. That would be the local collection to that municipality. And then the same math again, how does that sales tax work out per resident? And you know, I would love to have added another column here, the price of a gallon of milk in that town, because I find that's a real solid way to do that. A lot of folks in, I thought about Joe while I was doing this, as, boy, that median home price number is, at least it's consistent all the way across. Would I go to bat for that, you know, in front of a firing line? Probably not, but I bet it's within 5 to 10%. But at least it's consistent across all the cities. And that does have an effect on the cost of living index, which I think is a really important number when you look city to city across the state, where the cost of living index at 100, which is essentially 100%, that's the national average. So you get a city there in line 12, which I got to scroll back over, they're at 100.2, they're 0.2% over the national average. And then something at the top there like Yakima at 92.9, they're below the national average, but it's one way to compare the cost of living in Yakima to the cost of Bainbridge Island, for instance. So another set of numbers, and I believe in the memo I talked about what made up that number, 30% housing, food, and all those things. So pretty standard bowl or bag of goods on those items. So I decided before I really got deep into the weeds, I better stop there, get some counsel from this commission and see where we want to go. Worth mentioning, I can manipulate these, sort by whatever, but I did do an alphabetical, so if you're like, oh, where's Ellensburg? There they are. So you can look at your list this way. And then we all know that the cost of living on Eastern Washington versus Western Washington, they're really two completely different things. So I pulled all the Eastern Washington cities into this tab for review. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I created another one that just, here's our comparables. And I did that by population again, so we can take a look at that. So if we were doing, like I said, a bargaining contract or something, we would really hone in on these numbers because they're similar to us. They're on the east side. They deal with the same types of things. Pullman is super unique of being a college town that we are. Ellensburg doesn't quite get there with their university. UW gets lost in Seattle, as you know. Gonzaga gets lost in Spokane. So is there really any place comparable? I would say no. That's coming from the head and the heart. Karen hired me. I got to keep throwing that out there every once in a while. So that's just kind of a quick overview on the numbers and how we got there. And I'm happy to answer any questions or address any concerns. It's a lot to take in. So when I talked to several of you to join this group and some of the information I gave to Dee to convince you that this was a good use of your time, is the way I kind of envision the group is this. That is not the way you have to do it. It is completely up to you. But you know, having this initial meeting, going over some of the discussion topics, asking the city to go back and do some more research, that would be a really good way to end this meeting, along with setting the future schedule. And then we could come back with that additional research in the next meeting for a full-on discussion if there's more that's needed. And then saving that third meeting for holding that public hearing, and then concluding a final decision to move up to the clerk. So I give that to you, I guess, as a gift, as more of a, here's the world according to Mike. Please make it, it's wet clay. Please make it to whatever you'd like.
I think one comment and maybe a part of discussion that I would bring up is when you talk about a cost of living index, but you're also looking at wages that are not the sole wage for that individual. So we're not expecting someone to be their only source of income. And so, you don't want to go into it with, well, we have to pay them enough so that, it's a living wage, because that's not the whole thing. But I don't know, there's also maybe one other issue for more information on the cities that are comparable. How often does their city council meet? Because some of them are set, we're going to meet 2 times a month. Others, we're going to meet every week. So that could make a difference on, you don't want to get in from a payroll perspective to pay them for the number of times they meet, because that's a nightmare to try to, okay, did they meet 2 times this month? Or this is a long month, they met 3. That's just too much work to add to that. But if they are designated by their code or by their city that we're only going to meet the first and the third Wednesday, but yet the next city meets 5 times, you would pay the city meeting 5 times more. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And I don't know that it said that there.
Well, one problem I have looking at a list of what's listed as part-time is, what does that mean? I'm a little bit afraid as I said yes to Dee because she asked and was nice. But then as I started thinking about it, I started thinking, and really, what I need to understand is how much time these council people put in this mayor, and how is that different? I have a feeling if you've seen one city council operate, you've seen one city council operate.
Right.
And so I struggle with how, I think comparables are good and useful, but it doesn't really give me a sense. My sense is we want to be fair in dealing with this council and the time they put in, and talk about how frequently they meet. The other thing is, how frequently does one cancel or not? You may have a standing meeting that does or doesn't happen. And then, of course, I sit here and say I want to make sure that it isn't a revenue drain for people that may not be able to commit the time and forego time away from their office by participating in civic obligations, because some can do that, some can't.
And I know just from history, our council members, just Tuesday night is really kind of a small portion sometimes
Right.
of what they're doing. They're also on committees that meet once a month or twice a month outside of that, or and they can choose how active they want to be in other areas if they, want to be out and about. But there are some that they have designated responsibilities to be, on the airport board or,
Right.
left board or some other
Right.
board. So that increases the amount of time. And I don't think we would ever be able to get comparables from other cities on what they did outside of council. I think it would be there's no apples and oranges that you could put in there. But I think that's a consideration that we have to
Right.
put in as well. And the amount of time, all councils, I would imagine, get the packets that our council gets. So the time commitment is probably similar, although the smaller the city gets, maybe not as much. But if
maybe
they
more.
read their packet, there's a significant amount of time involved in that as well.
Right.
If it pleases the commission, thought I was having here is, would you like me at the next meeting to maybe invite the mayor and one of the council members to just discuss, here's what a typical is for me. And in the meantime, we can, if it's, again, pleases the commission, we'd be happy to research the Eastern Washington cities as to how often they're meeting. We can certainly do the whole state.
I wouldn't do
Thank you.
that, because it's not going to be, you're going to get out of the apples to apples as soon as you start pulling in cities that are much larger or cities that are much smaller. But if, like the comparables, that's kind of the reason why you have those, because although they're not the same, because they never will be, but they're going to be more similar than, those outside that parameter.
Yeah. Anecdotally, I can tell you from my experience on the other side, sitting on an outside committee or commission, very standard, because a lot of cities are involved in bigger organizations. So being a member that you're attending this meeting once a month, pretty standard. Same with the mayor. The mayor's additional responsibility of the airport, that's something I have never seen before until I came here. So that's a whole nother animal that I can't really quantify or qualify without his notice, other than he is the mayor of Pullman is the president of the airport board, chairman of the airport board. So I think having that conversation could certainly help.
Well, and having known some previous mayors and knowing Glenn, he would be extraordinary as far as the amount of time that he commits to that. Because there have been mayors who have done, you know, barely in the office, barely coming in, whereas Glenn tends to be more on, hands-on. So there's a personality thing. So it might have to be tempered. If Glenn came in and told us all we did, we just go, you know, we can't pay you for all that, that's, you know, but
Sure.
the next person may not be as active. So it's more what the expectation is, where one could far exceed that expectation.
Sure. And then one of the things that I have done since I have stepped into the seat is I've taken that step to try to bring council and put them more in the forefront on things, to the point where they are working on their own committees now. The branding group that just met last week, and they're meeting collectively on a regular basis. The downtown group, one of the council members sits on the steering committee. So getting them more actively involved instead of just Tuesday nights in the role of their government has been one of my goals. So yeah, I've given them some extra work, but they've all taken it very willingly.
I may have missed it, but is on the spreadsheets, are there the number of employees in the jurisdictions?
Yeah, I didn't touch the part-time piece because it got a little wonky as you went down the line. So in column I, where it's marked FT, that is the amount of full-time staff approved in that budget for that city. So there's a lot of cities that got a lot of part-time staff, but a lot of that part-time staff might be, like around here, seasonal recreation. I refereed a couple of soccer games. So are they consistent? Yeah. And yeah, so those numbers got really weird with doing the FTEs with that group. So I kind of just split them off and went here. I can add those numbers in for additional review, but I think it left a lack of clarity for me.
How about departments? I know some cities contract, for services with counties for various services, and I think even including parks. Am I right, Karen?
Parks, police, fire, a
Yeah.
lot of those.
So is there a comparable statistical database through the AWC that has that information?
There is, and if it pleases the commission to just look at these Eastern Washington cities, and if you want to add back in those other two cities that were excluded in the top 10, Spokane and Spokane Valley, we certainly can. Taking that list from 47 to something manageable would be great. And Spokane Valley is a great example of that, Ted, because they do contract out for fire service. So they don't manage that. They contract out for stormwater. So, yeah, we could put something together like that as well. Would you like me to add back in Spokane and Spokane Valley for this discussion? Okay. We'll keep it to the,
They're so different. Yeah.
we'll keep it to the 11 that are here.
That becomes an orange.
So are we agreed that that spreadsheet there is realistically what we're going to move forward with and compare things out? Are we looking for a consensus of that nature today? Because I certainly don't want to continue to keep getting too broad. I like the idea of narrowing down to a smaller.
To the Eastern Washington.
Yeah, Eastern
more or less
Washington.
comparable.
I didn't really quite want to go into the comparable yet, but I look at, okay, let's work with this group, let's analyze it, come back now that we've heard a couple points, get a couple more points, and maybe go from there.
Yeah, I think you'd get lost in the minutia of the differences if you started trying to dig deeper into, are they exactly like us? Because none of them are going to be.
Right.
And then you just have a lot of superfluous stuff that you didn't really want to consider anyway, so I think that's.
And so if we're asking Mike to get information on like how often do they meet and everything of that nature, stick with this group?
I would
I think so, yeah.
No.
Yeah,
And
you
I
bet.
like that. I like the how often do they meet, the time involved, how many committees, and then additional duties. I think that it's more or less the bullet points that you were discussing. I think those are all fair.
Okay.
Are there other pieces that we need?
We may find some as we go along, but I think definitely to get things started, there's plenty of information there to work with.
Yeah. And for those of you up there that love Excel, not as much as I do, but just love it a little bit, feel free to manipulate all you want. And if it gets to a point where it's unraveled, go back to the agenda item that you were sent and it's a clean sheet, you can start over. And if you want some help, I can certainly run through some things for you on a different basis.
So is the next meeting going to be kind of our work group where we're pushing through these numbers and going, okay, let's narrow it down? Or how do you guys see this working into our next meeting? I guess that's what I'm trying to make sure that I do my homework correctly.
Well, I think we all get a chance to just, go through the data and with it, and then we'll have questions that may come up after we see something that seems odd, but that, at least can push that conversation in that direction.
And I've always worked under the philosophy if one of the commissioners were to reach out to me and say, hey, what about this? I would run that scenario and send it to everybody, knowing that if one of you have the question, probably all of you have the question.
And of course, it'll be good to get Hallie's opinion.
So I think based on what I'm hearing, I would like some time this week to maybe talk to the mayor and then maybe talk to Councilmember Wright, who's been our longest serving council member, and get them in front of you for just some question and answer back and forth. And then I have some ability to do some research in between. Dee can help me out with that. And going ahead of that next meeting, produce that information ahead of time for some at-home research and then follow-up questions. So I don't know if it's in your best interest, this is a question, to set all the meetings now, but I think certainly setting the next meeting maybe no sooner than the week after next, so I can line up my end and make sure folks are available. It's probably a good course of action.
So that puts us, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
That puts us into November. I would be available late in the week of the 14th. I have surgery on the 14th, so I don't know how.
Well, we can't see you post-surgery, looped up.
No, I don't take any medications, so I wouldn't be looped up, but I
Whoa.
might be cranky.
So would you
anytime
wanna
later
do it
that
on a
week, But then we're
Thurs-
into Thanksgiving on the week after that, so.
Would you want to do it on
I am
Thursday or
available.
Friday?
Pardon?
Thursday and Friday is not good for me that week. Wednesday is.
Okay. I will be back from a trip on the 16th. I'm leaving the 8th, so,
And I'll leave the 16th.
and you leave the 16th.
Yeah.
Okay, out the 14th, leaving the 16th, back the 16th. 16th is good, 17th and 18th are bad. Okay. If we meet late next week, I can hustle.
Yeah, I'm fine next week.
Next week, I'm leaving on the 8th for California. Won't be back till
So the 6th and the 7th would be okay, Ted?
6th and 7th are good, which is...
6th is Sunday.
6th is Sunday.
No, Sunday's good. No.
Oh, I'm looking at October, I apologize. I thought it would roll over just because I thought about it. Okay, so,
Does
back,
the 7th give you enough time to do what you need to do?
I believe so. The good news is, yes, the 7th gives me enough time. I think limiting it down to Eastern Washington certainly cuts a lot of the legwork down, and I'll enlist some help on the research. And it's just pinning the mayor's schedule down. Actually, real quick, hey, you got a quick second? Yeah. So the mayor's next door meeting with staff, apparently, so see if we can zero him in, because if I can't get the first council member, I'll work my way down the list. But certainly having the mayor speaks. So he's going to check on some times. What time works best for this group? We did it in the morning the first time. If there's a better time of day, we can certainly move things around. I will tell you on the 7th, we do have a city council work session on the budget from 6 to whenever, so probably need to be done by 6, whatever was decided.
Later morning or afternoon would be better on the 7th for me.
I like later morning better.
Yeah, I have a doctor's appointment at 9:20, but it's a pre-op thing, so it's just like, not gonna take very long.
Open.
Okay.
Open.
Okay, so 11 o'clock is an hour enough, or should I move it to 90 minutes, or just leave it open-ended?
As an open public meeting, if it was longer, we could say, there is no time limit.
There isn't.
So if we ran over, we ran over.
The way I think about people, if I start hearing Tubby's growl around noon, I start to get, I want to help. So that's just kind of what was on my mind.
Anytime between 9:30 and 5.
Oh, wow, that's pretty good.
So I will recommend to the commission that you call your next meeting on the 7th at 11 a.m. This room.
I move, that'd be perfect.
So move.
Okay, just so I'm clear, how often do these Eastern Washington cities meet, look into their additional commissions, as well as the departments that are within the purview versus what's contracted outside? Get a mayor and a council member here to talk about what a typical month, work week, year, how much time they put into these things, just for some back and forth dialogue. And then whatever else is comes up between now and then from the commission, we can address on a one-on-one basis. Is that what I'm hearing?
That sounds good.
Okay, we'll make it happen. We can do it. So Dee will want to get that agenda out no later than lunch on Thursday. Outstanding. All right. Okay. Thank you, Commission. That's all I had. If there's any more discussion amongst you, otherwise,
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move. Second.
Moved and seconded, or adjourn?
vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you again, very much, everybody.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to be the difficult one.